Welcome everyone. Thank you for viewing this partner enablement session. In this session, we're going to be covering the online solution configuration tool. Specifically, we're going to be creating a VxRail solution. Before we start, however, there are great online resources at the Dell Partner Portal. Please see the links included here for access to the Partner Portal, as well as access to the OSC tool and the tutorials for that tool. To make solution building quicker and easier, please go into the tool and create some test solutions for yourself. Become familiar with the order that OSC asks for information. It's different for every product. Sometimes it asks for make and model first and CPU second. Sometimes it's asking for CPU types first. It does change from model to model and from type to type. For this particular example, I've actually created a quick cheat sheet, if you want to call it that, for help for this example for training and specifically for VxRail. We will actually make that available for you to download if you want to start with something that's already pre-canned from a cheat sheet, but there's really not a lot to it. So with that, I'm going to start, and I'm going to bounce right over to the actual configuration that we're going to use here. And it is a sample configuration, and it's a sample configuration out of my quotes. So this is a customer contacted one of our partners and asked them for a re-up on this product suite. So we wanted to create a new solution with new pricing for this configuration. And so as you can see with my cheat area here on the side, what I've done is I've put in, because I've become familiar with the P570 and the VxRails in general, I put in the cheat sheet on how it's going to be created within the OSC tool. And what this does is it prevents and helps us from bouncing around between two tools, Excel and OSC, and hunting and pecking for information. It puts all the information into the correct order. So with that, we're going to start off with question number 1. On the cheat sheet is the VxRail type. So as I indicated by talking, but also here, it is a P570. I'm going to mark P570. And then we got to find the number of nodes. So as I look through this, I have my first node here and the software associated with it. And then as I continue to scroll down, I have another 5 nodes, so I have a total of 6 now, with their software. Continuing down the page, I don't have any other software for this build, any other nodes. So I have 6 total nodes on this configuration. So I'm going to go through and do 6. And now I need to go through and understand what is being asked for from the configuration tool. So the first question is, what is the configuration of the P570? And this configuration can fall into 2 different pieces. It can be a hybrid node with spinning disks, or it can be an all flash. So as I scroll down this list of hardware, I'm going to be looking specifically for hard drives and SSDs. So as I scroll down, I do see my capacity drives. They're SATA-based SSDs. And as I scroll down just a little further, I do see my caching drives, which are, of course, either SSDs or NVMe or Optane. So in this particular case, this is an all-flash configuration. As we move down Steve's cheat list, we do have a VxRail chassis type. Now, for the 570, this is a slight difference. The P570 and V570 have 2 different chassis. The first chassis will support 1 CPU, and the second chassis will support 2 CPUs, but also NVMe capabilities. So as I scroll down here, I do see a couple of things that pull me towards that NVMe 2 CPU. The first one is obviously that there are 2 CPUs in this build. And then the second one is the fact that they have this 2U1N NVMe advanced capability. And so it's going to be the 2 CPU that we want from a chassis perspective. We've already clearly identified now the nodes, the number, as well as the configurations and chassis type. So now we're on to our CPU. Well, we've already pulled them out. They're the 8280s. And now we have to continue down the list. So as we continue down, we have to identify the memory type, speed, and the memory capacity. So as I scroll down this list, I do see my memory type here, 2933. And the memory capacity, as I scroll down, is going to be 12 of the 64 gig DIMMs. So finishing with the memory, we're going to move on to the connectivity. How are these nodes talking to the network that they have sitting behind them? And so as I scroll down this list, I'm going to be looking for 10 GBE, 25 GBE, some sort of network connectivity. And what I found here is the default Intel X710 quad port 10 gig SFP+. So I'm going to do an X710 quad port SFP+. I'm going to continue looking for networking on here. There is none, so there is no secondary network. And so now I'm moving on to the storage, the actual hard drives themselves. But we've already pulled them out that they're all SSD, so I have an 800 gig, and I have 2 of them. And then from a capacity, I have 3.84 terabyte drives of SATA SSD, and there's 10 of them. And SATA is actually you do need to make sure that it's SATA or SAS. SAS drives perform a little bit better, but they are actually a lot more expensive. Specifically for the 570, the P570, because we chose the chassis that has 2 CPU capabilities as well as NVMe capabilities, there are no NVMe drives on this configuration, so we do need to make sure that we do have pick none on this. As we go through the configurator, I'll show you, but these are the flex drives, the advanced capabilities for disks and performance. This is actually just a note to yourself. The VxRail hyperconverged infrastructure system software needs to be changed to match the capacity, number, size, and type. So as we change the drives, we will also need to change this VxRail hyperconverged infrastructure system software. As we continue down the cheat list, we look at and we find a TPM. So we scroll back down and it is a TPM 2.0. Oops, wrong one. And then we have to look for years of hardware support. In this particular case, the hardware support is at 60 months. It is Pro Support Plus with next business day. Continuing down here, we're looking here, Pro Support next business day. And so all of this is next business day support. So it's going to be 5 years, next business day, and it's Pro Plus. And then we're going to look for keeping your hard drives or keeping your parts or parts retention, component retention. It actually did change its names a little bit throughout the years. In this particular case, as we scroll through, we do see a parts retention. So I'm going to keep that down as parts and then show you that in the configuration tool as we get there. And then the rest of these just reflect what type of software. So we have our vSAN software. So as I look through this list, I am going to be looking for vSAN, and vSAN here is vSAN Advanced. And we do need to make sure that the change, as we make changes to these software solutions, they need to reflect the number of CPUs above. So we need to change their numbers to 2. Looking at the hyperconverged OS tier, and then software services will also need to be changed to match the 2 CPUs. So with that, we've actually finished the basic configurations from my little cheat sheet. So what we're going to do is we're going to move that off, and then I'm going to show you why we do this in the first place. Because we've spent about 4 minutes converting from an old bill of materials into flow that works for the online solutions configurator. So I'm going to bring up the online solution configurator. And now we're here. So again, please view the tutorials and learn how to create a solution and assign it to your customer. Learn how to access the system and what options that there are in there for support and for access and what product suites are in there. But today we're looking again at that VxRail. So I'm going to take the easy approach. You can technically find VxRail here on the corner, but what I like to do is I just like to find and search for it. So I'm going to search for VxRail. And again, this is a P570, so I'm going to look down the government solutions for P, and here's our government P570. So I'm going to add that to my configuration. And now that it's been added, I'm going to configure it. So again, as we go down, we just validate and verify the settings that we've chosen. So government VxRail P570. And then the next thing is how many nodes do we need? So I have 1 node right now, so I'm actually going to upgrade that to 6. So now that I have 6 nodes, I'm going to scroll back down. I'm going to continue down my checklist. So as I come through here, I have a VxRail P570, but I'm going to highlight something here for you. First off, that if it's an unmarked model, so P570, for instance, generally speaking, it's a hard drive capable or a hybrid capable system. So what I want to do is we do want to change the configuration to be all flash. So as I look through my list, I have my Vs, I have my P570F, which is the one I'm going to select. And then you'll notice I have my VCF configurations. So VMware Cloud Foundation. So as I continue to scroll down this list, I'm going to go through and I'm going to, the next one is the type of chassis. And again, the default chassis for the 570 is just with 1 CPU. So I want to pull that down and I want to do the 2 CPUs. And notice that with not only supporting 2 CPUs, it also does support NVMe, which is the reason that I had answered the question that there were no extra drive, no NVMe or Optane drives. We're going to select our processor. Now this tool is under continual advancement. They're continually making this tool better. So if you search for your 8280 here, it'll pull them out and then we need to select the version that we have. But you'll notice that it immediately changes the second processor. So again, these tools are under continual evolution. They are changing and getting better and better. So we've now configured our CPUs, so let's move on to the next cheat sheet item, which is our RAM. So as we continue down the configuration to memory, which is the next item. So you'll notice that the DIMM type, however, is not 2933. In fact, 2933 is not even in this list anymore. And that's because they've moved on from 2933 to 3200. So right now, if you see an older configuration with 2933, just understand that it is the newer, faster DIMMs at 3200. We need to change our capacity. So we're going to select the 64 gigabyte DIMMs because we need 12 of them. And then once selected, we will unselect the 16s. If you unselect the 16s first, it will actually not stick. It'll keep them selected because you have to have memory in the system. So as we can continue down through the list, we have the next cheat sheet item, which is our networking. Our primary networking is the 710 quad port SFP+, which happens coincidentally to be the default on this configuration. However, just to show you what options there are, we do support an X550 as well as Broadcom, Mellanox, and QLogic cards. But there is a good amount of networking that your customers can have with this system. So we move on to the next because we are not going to select any additional networking. The next selection is our hard drives. So now we're going to pull this open. And this is where, because of the information that's in the Excel spreadsheet, you'll notice it does not have any information on this caching drive line. It just says 800 gig SSD. So we're going to make and just infer from this that the default right now is a 400 gig, but it's a PM5 type drive. So what I'm going to select is I'm going to select the 800 gig PM5 drive, just to keep those types the same. They must have selected that by default for a reason, though I do not know what it is. And now that we've selected it, we do need to change the drives to 2. And then we do need to check the capacity drive. So we have 10 of the 3.84 SATA drives. So as I scroll down, you'll notice there is a SATA and a SAS option for these drives. The SATA is much, much less expensive. Now it does perform a little worse, but that is a read-only desire, and generally speaking, the cost difference is actually pretty significant. I'm going to unselect that, and then we will change the 3.84s to 10. And you'll notice my note here. My note here is we have to go change the VxRail HCI system software to match 10 3.84 SATA drives. But it's not here in the list. And this is one of the inconsistencies in the tool. So in this particular version, the 570, it's all the way towards the bottom. With some of the other configurations, it's all over the place. So in this particular case, the easiest way to change that is to scroll up to the top and then look at the quantity and capacity of the HCI capacity SKU. So if we click on that, because it's a link, it will take us right down to the correct area, which is all the way down at the bottom, and then we can change it to match. So we do need our 3.84 terabyte SATAs. And we do need to change it to 10. Once we've successfully changed that, we're going to scroll back up to the top. Notice our error is gone, and then we'll continue on. So the next part here is our FlexBay options. And again, we do not have NVMe or Optane on this configuration, but you do need to indicate that in the tool. So we're going to expand that, and then we're going to do diskless PowerEdge, which means there are none of the special drives. As a note, for those of you guys who talk to customers and engage, VxRail is actually very, very dynamic. You can include fiber channel host bus adapters into the configuration so that they can connect to their older style storage arrays. So their VMAXs or PowerMax or some of the other storage arrays that they could have out there. But there's a lot of flexibility with VxRail. Continuing down the list, we do have a TPM, Trusted Platform Module. So we're going to pull that down and click on 2. As a note, once selected and ordered, a VxRail, if it is ordered with a TPM 2, cannot be changed, or a TPM 1.2. TPM is hardwired into the system and it cannot be changed. So validate with your customer which version that they do plan on using if they want to use that. There's a lot of stuff in here that we're going to skip. We do have our 5 years of support. So the next thing down here is our hardware support services. And we are looking for 5-year next business day Pro Plus. So we're going to extend that. And we're going to look for 5 years of Pro support with next business day. And we get an error again. Why can I not change this? Well, you do get the idea that we would normally just change this down to the next business day support for 5 years. I will try to figure out what is wrong with the tool at this point. Continuing down the list, we want to find the keep your parts. Now here it is actually labeled keep your hard drive, but as you expand that, we do have 3 years. It will actually auto update. So if you do 5 years of support, this will automatically update and say 5 years of keep your hard drive or keep your components. Now in this case, we have keep your parts listed in the bill of materials, parts retention. So we are actually going to keep your components, parts, components. They change the vernacular once in a while as well. Continuing down the list, we have our vSAN software. So as we configure down, here's our VMware vSAN software. If I extend that, again, we are on vSAN Advanced. If you change it to 5, that will also change to 5. However, we do need to change this to the number of CPUs. So we will change this to 2. As we continue down the cheat sheet, we do have our OS tier, which is our VxRail hyperconverged OS tier. We're going to pull that down, and we're going to change that to 2 to reflect the number of CPUs. And then last but not least is software services. We're going to scroll down, software services, and change this to 2 as well. Now, once we've configured everything in the cheat list, as we scroll all the way up to the top, I'm going to shrink all these down for sake, we should have no errors. Again, all of the rest of the pieces and parts do actually default to the correct VxRail configuration. So we're going to validate this. It validates correctly because there are no errors. There's a couple of small warnings about licensing and if you need some extra networking. And then we're going to save it. So at this point, this system, this solution is now ready to be shipped off to distribution for pricing. So what we're asking is that you put in an email a couple of different pieces and parts to the subject line, as well as the solutions configurator ID. The solution configurator ID is right here. It's the 127 number. So as we can communicate, please send the original bill of materials if you have one, the solution ID that you've built, and what that's going to allow us to do is provide pricing back to you, hopefully very, very quickly. Because there's no errors, we can just go into the system and start pricing it. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly, Stephen Tuomey at federal.dell.com, or you can certainly contact your distribution. So again, thank you and have a very good afternoon.